Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, all. Thanks for joining us. We've got a special session. It's Copilot Day today, so we've timed it beautifully. Not that we had any prior warning, but we have got two special guest stars. Hopefully, Kevin will join us too as well. But Paul Bullock is here, so thank you for joining us, Paul. And to be honest, you guys have had a lot of exposure to Copilot, so it's great to have you. Thank you for finding time and moving meetings around to make this session. We're going to be talking about our new cognitive business competency, updated, and also the impact of Microsoft Copilot today. So thanks for joining us. Next slide, please. I know we couldn't have timed it any better, could we? Marc, would you like to talk about the agenda?
Sure. So the agenda is pretty much the same every session that we do. We we talk a little bit about what the maturity model is for people who are new to these calls. We talk about what we have in place, what you can use, a little bit about what kinds of things we hope you can do with the model, and maybe how you can get involved. We take a picture of all the people who are here on the call getting so excited and waving and things like that, like we do on all the P&P calls. And then we jump into the main event so that we can give Paul and Kevin as much time as we can to talk about the meat of the call. This is the link that you can use if you want to join the call every month. That will add it to your calendar, and it's sort of in perpetuity. There are some months that we don't have a call, and if you show up and we're not here, that's why. But mostly that's in the summer and over the holidays. Simon H.
Okay, we have a whole bunch of things that we've created over the few years that we've been working on this maturity model stack. So on the right hand side, you've got the artifacts that we've created, all of which are on the Microsoft Learn site. I'll just fire you a link to that just so I remember. Let's go and grab it from there. I'll stick a link in the chat for those that are not immediately hooked into that. There we go. So the purple ones were, oh, that's unusual. There we go. The purple ones are the published competencies. The light purple ones are the competencies we've intended to publish and have been promising for about half a year now, and we will get around to eventually. No promises as to when. We've got some tools, most particularly about how to actually set up and run your own maturity model workshops. And then on the right-hand side, in the sort of the greeny colour, there are some supporting articles, some principles and some how to elevate, which are a little bit more technical, technology specific. And then on the left, there's our mission, if you like, the purpose of what we're trying to do with these calls and with the maturity model in general. And today we're looking at the third item down on that list, which will be the cognitive business. The cognitive business competency and the updates that we've done around that. Right, now we can go. And the maturity model itself, we always show this slide because it's the core of it. It's split into 5 levels, which we call levels 100 through 500, and they're really of improving, if you want to use that word, I think improving set of capabilities that the organization has to do a set of different things like collaboration or AI-based activities. And at the level 100, it's you're just not very good. You haven't really got any processes. You're making it up as you go along. You're trying to just muddle along. By level 200, you recognize that you really do need to do something about organizing this, but you haven't really nailed that all down yet. You're trying to learn your way into what to do, which would be adequate. And by level 300, you're doing whatever that competency is, communication or business process or whatever it is, you're doing that as a pretty acceptable level. Most people do the right things most of the time in a agreed, sustainable way. And then by the time we get to level 400, you're really bloody good at it. You've figured out how to optimize some of the processes, not all of them, but you're starting to use measurements and feedback and active or proactive interventions to improve whatever it is you do. And then right up at the top, the really rare, the paragon of the levels is you've actually automated and you found really elegant and sophisticated ways to do some things brilliantly. And we find very few organizations do anything brilliantly. No organization can hope to do everything brilliantly, but some organizations do everything at level 300 or above. And that's what we would hope to get to you two. Right.
All right. Somebody needs to take the picture. Whose turn is it?
I can do that if you want. I've got
All right,
Camtasia
cool.
all set up.
Excellent. There's Michael Blumenthal, who's going to join us next week to talk about his, the things.
Yeah.
We'll get to it in a few minutes.
Oh, I can't change the layout. Why can't I change it? Yes, I must be able to. Here we go. Together mode. There we go. Is that working? No, that's not working.
So while we're getting this set up, if you'd like to join the Wavy group, please turn your camera on, and then we'll capture you all in the together mode, and you'll feature in next month's version of this slide. So stick your camera on if you're not so shy that you don't want to be involved.
Right, it's just about to start recording. If you could.
Okay, everybody wave.
Do some waving. Thank you very much. Great waving. Thank you very much.
You have some skills.
Hopefully I'm recording the right window.
All right. Have we waved enough?
I think so. Yeah, I think.
Right. All right. I'm gonna.
Oh, Simon, you're stuck waving. That's why.
It's amazing how simple that is to do, but we never get exactly right, do we?
Oh.
Not important right now. Okay, so just to finish off this introductory piece, so here are some links to some related stuff. We always encourage you to get involved at this point. So if you've got any thoughts on the maturity models that we've created, or indeed you can just jump on in on GitHub or some of the other tools and propose modifications direct, or you can contact us. There's a whole bunch of links there. There's also a link right at the bottom left to the recording. We record all of these practitioner sessions and eventually get them up onto that link, so you can review what we've said in the past and find out how wrong we were in some cases with predicting the future. Because we put the original maturity model for cognitive business, the AI one, out in about February last year, so it's been nearly a year, and I don't know about you, but it feels like some things may have changed in that time. Right, so we haven't mapped out the rest of 2024 yet. We will get to that, but today we're doing the cognitive business and the impacts of Copilot on that. And then next month, Michael is kindly going to come along and talk to us about a new class of content we're producing called practical scenarios. So that's looking at a particular scenario like service management and figuring out how would one apply maturity models to thinking about improving that one thing. So we tend to start with the philosophical stuff and say this is what super looks like. And then Michael and others are saying, what about deploying applications? And we'll look at how you do that in a maturity model kind of a way. So if you want to do one of those, let us know. We'll shoehorn you into the rest of the not overburdened program so far.
That's the thing that Michael's doing. That's what I meant.
Practical scenarios. Yep.
Looks like we've got some.
Yep, excited to do that.
Thank you, Michael.
Right, these sessions are meant to be interactive. So if you've got something to say, something to chip in, something to dispute, because we like that too, then do feel free to either raise your hand, that's a sign to us that you'd like to speak, or just come off mute and jump in if that's your thing. Just remember to be polite and respectful, all that kind of Microsoft stuff. Or you can stick questions in the chat if you don't want to interrupt proceedings, and we'll curate those and make sure that the questions or the comments do get addressed. So any of these ways to get involved.
So, so as Simon mentioned, we put out a V1 last year. It was around about March time, wasn't it? I think so. It was just as Microsoft started talking about that that Copilot word. And so in December, we all got together and we started talking about, right, really, we probably need to think about generative AI and update this cognitive business area. And so these were what are the things we were thinking about when we were doing that. So most of these updates have been published now to the articles. I know we've got a couple more that are in the GitHub pipeline. So we're just sorting out a few tweaks. But what we wanted to do really was to talk about, how do we're all on this journey to learn about generative AI and all these tools, but how we can make magic with them. And that's really what we wanted to start kind of trying to help ourselves and also help all of you and work together so we can all learn together. We wanted to provide some things which are actionable as well. So we've added some new sections to each level to talk about, what those next steps would be to get into that level. So, I'd love you to have a look through those and see, what you think. We talk about, where would you get started? How would you start, getting that those sort of accessing those low-hanging fruit, to coin that phrase, and start showing the value of these tools in your organization. But originally, when we did originally do the cognitive business competency, Microsoft Copilots did not exist. So we needed to take that into consideration. And like I say, we wanted to provide that journey, direction on that journey that you could take. And to be honest, that's really something which you could have a look at us and take us to task and see if you agree with us or don't, or if it just needs some tweaks. We'd love to hear from you on that. And here is a QR code and a link to the cognitive business competencies as we said it. Team, is there anything else which I've missed? Anything which you think we should bring up here on updates or thoughts?
Well, I guess it's worth saying that in the light of the generative AI, the Copilot story, we will be going back and looking at all of the other competencies over the coming year. And again, if you've got any thoughts on what needs to be added to any of those competencies to improve them, please do share. It's quite a lot of heavy lifting we do, and it's a lot easier if you guys can contribute as well.
Marc, what were you going to say?
Nothing important.
Okay. So this is where we bring Paul into it. Last week, Paul and Kevin and all of us, we all met up and we just started talking about their experiences with the Copilots. So this is some of the notes which we picked out, some of the points we wanted to get cut across. So, yeah, Paul, would you talk about your points?
Yeah, sure. So just to set a little bit of context who I am, for those of you who may not know me. So I'm Paul Bullock. I'm a modern workplace architect at Avenade, and I've been and I'm also a dual MVP as well. So this is both in the M365 apps and services and development spaces in this. And with that, those two parts, with Avenade, we're part of the EAP program. So we've been able to have Copilot for, I think I've had it since July last year, when I was onboarded as one of the early cohorts within the organization. So that meant that we could explore the tool, feedback, how we use it, and potentially identify sort of areas of value that we can add to clients that are also in this program. We're all in this very new space. Microsoft literally fire hosed all this stuff, going from, I think, build all the way up to, well, still going now. Even yesterday was a massive new sets of announcements with the widening of who can get these sort of Copilot licenses. So you're no longer subject to the 300 limit. You don't have to be an enterprise. You can get it through the portals now, and also there's things like your personal account. If you've got like an MSA account, Microsoft account, then you can get Copilot for that as well, which is it was good. Yes, so there's a blog, so I just noting on the chat there, yes, there is a blog that was released yesterday. We've tried to fire hose it and reshare it as much as possible, but essentially originally you had to have a minimum of 300 users, plus you need to have an M365 license, not O365, M365 license, say E3 or E5 to get Copilot. And this is the Copilot for M365. So I need to be specific because Microsoft have overloaded the word Copilot, as we've all, there's Copilot Studio, which is like a rename of Power Virtual Agents. There is Copilot, which is what I call the Bing chat one, and then you've got the M365, and you've got a whole range of them. So nearly every product in the Microsoft stack has got some form of Copilot tooling regarding that. So I've got to be very careful with the one that I'm specifying. So I'm talking about the Copilot for Microsoft 365, the one that you get in your tenants. And yes, so you originally had to have the 300 users plus the M365. So and you need to be an enterprise. You need an enterprise agreement to get that. So yesterday, Microsoft announced that all those limits have been lifted. So you don't need an M365 license. You can do it on Office 365, and you don't need 300 users. So if you've got say 10 or for smaller organizations, you've got 10 users, 100 users. I think it's from 1 to 300 now. So it's like it's massively opened up to all the sort of small and medium-sized businesses, which is I think a lot of traffic that I see in various forums have all been from that particular audience, or trying that out. So and I think the floodgates have now just opened. So, and this is great timing to have such a competency in place, because even you'll get that kind of huge wave of people joining, and you want to figure out where you can get value from these various Copilots. And I was just looking at the point one about justifying the cost of this. So we were talking on Friday amongst the team, and it's difficult to quantify the cost of Copilot because it's a very different tool, right? So we're all used to, in IT for over the years, a tool where you provide inputs and you get outputs in a fairly predictable fashion, right? So you open up Office, you want to write a Word document, you can produce that. You want to send an email, you click a button, it sends the email, right? But with Copilot, it's more of a conversation, and it's more like like the human element of it than it is a click by click by click. You know what the functions are, you know what to expect from those functions, and you can provide exact training on those outputs. But Copilot works very differently, whereas it tries to work out the output for you based on what you talk about, and so the mindset is very different. So when I talk about the cost of Copilot, people naturally think, well, hold on a minute, my E3 license is probably about $30 a month, and now I got to pay another $30 for this Copilot. Well, how do that seems like a lot of money, because I get all this functionality with Office 365, and now I've got to provide the same amount of money for this Copilot thing. So, but the cost is not necessarily versus the tech that you get in other products. I think that the Copilot license justification is more about your time that you save, because one of the most expensive resources within a business is the human, not the technology. Yeah. So obviously we're all paid via contracts or like permanent employment and things like that. So we get money each month and stuff like that, and that is far higher than $30 a month, right? So if you think about it, if you spend a lot of your time just gathering information, notes, or you've got lots of these little tasks that you do, you want to try and read through a huge document, and maybe you just want to get the highlights, or you've got several meetings that you can't attend. You've got to try and think, well, out of all these little tasks that I do, how much time am I burning that potentially I could offload to a tool? So and that's where the value sort of comes in, is say, do you know what, I just need a summary of a document, right? I just need to know what it's about and whether it's worth spending my time reading it, or whether you've got a meeting, you don't want to read through a 5,000 line transcript or an hour's worth of video. You just want, say, the summary decisions or the the outputs from that, which you can get within a few seconds. And that little blocks of time that you save doing these little things accumulates quite quickly, and that's where your value comes in with the Copilot. Certainly from my perspective in using it, where you do these tasks and then this tool is there available to you to be able to save you time, and then you can focus on higher value things, right?
I actually did some calculations on this a couple of weeks ago, Paul. In the UK, minimum wage, so the amount you have to pay people an hour is about £10. So the average, if somebody, even on the minimum wage, can save 3 hours in a month, they more than covered the cost of their Copilot subscription. And that obviously isn't going to be every employee, but even your cheapest employees realistically could save that amount of time in a month. Yeah, absolutely, Todd.
I like that, Todd.
Yep.
We'll pay you in Copilot licenses instead. But yeah, so that is a better way to compare the cost of Copilot versus you. It's you versus how much you can get done, how much time you save. And I always feel like Copilot is like, it's like a mate that you've got in the office that you sit next to. I work from home, so it's not the best analogy, but you say you've got, but back when we were working in offices, you sit next to colleagues around you, and you just go over to them and go, do you know what? I just need you to show me how to do things, or you just talk to them and say, I want to be able to do this. What do you think? Like, comes from that, and you have that kind of conversation with your Copilot to build out what you want. So you don't necessarily always get it. You might find this on any Copilot, not necessarily with the M365 one, but you want to do something and you don't always know exactly what you want to do, but you need to try and get that conversation going. And that's what humans do, really. We bounce off each other. We have that, hey, I've got this great thought, I want to do this, and then you get some information back, and then you go, well, actually, I'm just going to dive a bit deeper into that and say, well, actually, I just want this. Okay, perhaps it's a bit broader with humans, but with Copilot, it's very similar in that you can say, hey, I just want to get a summary of my emails, and then you get it back and you think, well, actually, I just want to get a summary, and can you just give me the top 3 points from these emails? And then before you know it, you're refining this output. And then you can use that going forward. And that's that conversational piece. And you get that experience everywhere. So it's a very different way of interacting with that. You wouldn't, if you're writing an email, you wouldn't click on the new email button and go, I want to send an email to Bob over there. Can you just put in his email address and then write a bunch of text and send it off? You would need to, you wouldn't have that conversation. It wouldn't be that it had to be very structured, whereas Copilot's not as structured. It's more conversational, if that makes sense. Does anybody have any sort of questions on that point? Do you see where the value is coming in? Do you still have any queries or thoughts about that sort of value element of it?
I think that's really interesting that you can, the idea of bouncing those ideas off this assistant. I think that's really, really interesting. I think also it's one of those things, sharing the kind of things you've bounced as well, like maybe a bit of the conversation which started and where it got you to, just so you can sort of show others the value that you got from that process as well.
Yeah. I see there's a hands up.
Yeah.
Do you want to come off mute?
Terence, go for it.
Hi folks. For some reason I can't reply to comments in chat, but I just want to pick up on what Marc was saying, that although you can easily justify $30 in terms of, if you divide my day rate, I can save this in a few hours, if not sooner. But if someone's having a conversation today, they don't necessarily have the cash in hand to buy it. So it's about looking for those niches. You could say, well, if you've got a team of 5 salespeople, you could, instead of recruiting another salesperson, you take a fraction of that budget which you had for a new salesperson, you give the 5 co-pilots and see whether they can equal the workload of hiring that sixth person. What I'm personally very uncomfortable with, although I know it's almost inevitable, is the kind of, oh, right, so I've got 10 salespeople. If I give them all Copilot, I only need to pay for 6 or 7. So let's get rid of the people we don't need. And that's a quite, and I think that's always been a problem with IT generally, but it's very immediate with Copilot. You can draw that line between, I've just sold them the software, and here is a handful of people are going to lose their jobs next month. That's quite a heavy thing to think about, and it's outside the scope of this discussion. But there's ways of kind of identifying the point that I wanted to make, though, and I think this is really important with Copilot and other AI tech, is that you've got to kind of pin down the business need first and have that conversation at a leadership level with a company to say, before we start, let's agree what are the tasks we want Copilot to replace completely, which ones do we want Copilot to supplement or augment, and which tasks do we not want Copilot to come near. And that, I think, will go a long way to addressing the resistance to change, which organizations are going to feel when they start talking about Copilot. Because, it's been in the media, some organization was talking about 40% of jobs going to be impacted by AI.
Yeah, and a lot of people, British Telecom talked about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, the interesting thing about the BT thing is that if you go in and read the detail, a lot of those job cuts they're talking about is actually, sorry, this is very niche for the UK, but it's folks who are involved in the fiber rollout. Once all the fiber is installed, there's a whole bunch of people who are not going to have jobs because there's no more fiber to install. But the media jumped on that and said, oh no, AI is getting rid of all of those jobs. Yeah, not quite. Anyway, I've said enough. Going a bit off topic here, but yeah, it's just really, we've got to think about this really on a business level as well as purely just what the tech can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's a really good point. Is how do you show the value? And it's a supporting tool. It's not the replacement of someone. It's everyone goes on about it's not autopilot. It's Copilot. It's a supporting tool, and that's really key.
And that's important, isn't it? To say that the Copilots that you get with the Microsoft stack are not designed to replace you. Yeah, they need you to get the thing going. It just might mean that you can complete the task that you were assigned to do faster, because you get. I mean, there's some of the key functions that Copilot does is you've got summarizations, taking, say, a large document. You just want to know what it is, because a lot of the times, you get people that write large documents. You want to convert it to a PowerPoint. So that is potentially possible with Copilot. You can feed an input document into PowerPoint, and the PowerPoint Copilot will at least start the ball rolling. And I will emphasize start the ball rolling, because it's by no means perfect. At least it get you going with those slides, and that sometimes you can get to the completion of that task quicker if it's wrong, because you know where it's wrong. You can then refine it. The harder part, and I certainly struggle for this, is you've got a task to do and you start with that blank document, right? And you're thinking, what do I need to do to fill this out? I've got say it was a blank document. I need to do a migration design or something. Okay, I could probably rattle off a few headings out in the style, but by the time I thought of those headings, I could have asked Copilot to suggest those headings for me, and it will populate the Word document. So it's a way of just jumping ahead and getting to the meat of what you're there to do, rather than you having to start out from the beginning. I don't believe that at least the Microsoft stack. I know that there are potentially other AI solutions, and AI's got a broad thing. So I do understand the fear factor regarding AI replacing jobs, and there is a little bit of media media polish going on, and even marketing polish from some of these larger businesses that say they can do these things, but there still needs to be that human element to validate that the outputs from these co-pilots, these AI tools, are what people want to use, just when they speak to customers. So I always feel that there's that need for that human filter to say, well, okay, the co-pilot said this, but I don't fully agree with it because it could lead to these issues, and it wouldn't know that. It wouldn't necessarily pick up on that. And yes, co-pilots will get better in the future, but we're nowhere near that point, in my opinion. So yeah.
So to move the conversation on, we talked to the one you mentioned as well on Friday was leveling the playing field, which I think is a really good point as well. So Paul, when you mentioned that, what were you thinking around that side, that point?
Leveling the playing field. I don't know if that was a Kevin comment.
Oh, was it? Oh, apologies.
It might have been.
See, if I had Copilot, it reminded me of who said what. So yeah, but yeah, no, this was around, like, I'm terrible with grammar, right? I will admit it. The rest of the team probably nod their heads. But Copilot really helps me get some of that right. And so leveling that playing field, I can be creative in some aspects, maybe not in others, but having Copilot helps support me in that and give me some confidence actually as well. And the approach I'm taking being the right approach,
I think that might have been more related to inclusivity, because we were talking about that, weren't we? About how, there are different people need different levels of support, and having co-pilots can help you fill the gaps in your strengths and weaknesses, especially my weaknesses. There are certain things like perhaps I want to get Copilot to take a waffly bit of text that I've written and summarize it into something that's a lot clearer for the audience. So in terms of leveling the playing field, that means that people can have and leverage those tools to you can potentially produce faster, so that obviously you've got the sort of production side of things as well. You've also got that additional support as well, and maybe I don't want to go through and search through 1,000 entries in a search engine. I just want to say, hey Copilot, I want to do this. What can you suggest a list of tasks that I can do to achieve that goal? And then that will go away and do that thing, and I can cognitively think about other things while that's coming back with results. Or I can have a look at it and go, do you know what, that makes sense, I think that would work, and I'll go and take that away. And I've saved myself some time on that and that. So that I think there is definitely an inclusive element to this that allows people, with different range of skills, different way they memorize things, way they think about things, that helps them improve on those. Say if you've got specific weaknesses, perhaps. That's how I feel in that. I know we did. I think we did touch on briefly in that call. So that kind of makes sense. Yeah.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, there's a few things as well. There's also a lot of there's definitely a human feel to Copilot, right? So because I've experienced having it and not having it, because when you're a consultant, you switch between clients and you go, that client doesn't have it. There's definitely it's like someone having your back, right? So if I get stuck on something, I can just go to the nearest Copilot. Okay, there are Copilots for different things. I can just go and ask it a question and do that thing. And sometimes you work on projects. I would have loved Copilot when I was a contractor, a single resource in a company that I own, going around clients, right? So I didn't have a team in the background. I would have loved to have Copilot when I was in that area, because I could have used that person as like that mate to say, hey, I'm stuck on this. I want to write this PowerShell script or this bit of code. Can you suggest something that would help me get started? And that would go away and think about that from whatever data sources that connects to. And I get the real sense of like my right arm's chopped off kind of feeling when I don't have access to these tools in other organizations. And that's it's a weird to feel that you without these tools, and I've become slightly dependent on some of them in these various components. So I've used M365 Copilot, I've used the GitHub Copilot quite a lot in my community work, and some at work as well. And I use they've got the Copilot app on the mobile phone, which essentially was the Bing Chat Copilot heavily, in my personal time. And I feel like that these tools do pretty well at getting the answer that I'm looking for, or I can ideate and explore thoughts with it, and then it can suggest things that would potentially take that idea into something that's more tangible that I can take forward. So I've just noticed the hands up there. Have you got a question, Terence?
Yeah, thanks. I'm interested actually to know from your personal experience, because I don't have access to the tools yet, but hopefully we will get it during the next few days, around just how what impact it's got just on normal search, because this has been something that for many years, and I think with this audience probably will resonate, because from back in the inception of this community focused on SharePoint, where getting people to use SharePoint search instead of wanting a navigation path plotted to go find something has been an eternal struggle. And the search tech's improved over the years. It's really good now, but when I was reading up on how the semantic index and the grounding and how all the interrelationships of what it pulls out a graph, what that will do for someone just doing a plain language search in their tenant, does Copilot actually turbocharge those search results? Is there a noticeable improvement, or is it kind of same as it ever was? I'm just interested in your personal experience on that.
So if I'm ever doing searching, I always start with Copilot. It's the M365 chat app in Teams. So you get Teams. You can also go to office.com. It's the same experience in a few other places. And I've used search over the years, and it has gotten much better. But I still feel like that I find my answer quicker with Copilot. Having said that, there is a caveat with that. Copilot has this uncanny ability, because it's part of search, it will choose the relevant results from your organization, and the semantic index is obviously is a more advanced engine that allows to detect those relationships between the various artifacts within your organization to pull up even more relevant results, and that combines things like tenant data, your personal data in your mailbox. Now, obviously, there are loads of security wrappers around all of this, so it is designed with security first in mind. So I'm not going to step too much in that territory, but essentially, it builds that map, and then when you create a query, you might need to pull from various sources in a search query. Search query is more, I'm looking for a document about this, perhaps. I do want that, but I want to base it on a few other data sources as well. So I find that it doesn't always get it right, and there is the caveat that I mentioned is that it's dependent on the quality of data in your tenant. So if you've got, that's a big thing. So if you've got a lot of, how can I put it, junk, right? It could pull back from that source of material. If you've just left it, you haven't used it in several years, you've asked a query, and perhaps you've not been too specific in your prompts, and obviously getting your prompts right would be is obviously a key thing to get the higher quality data. But it will lead into an exercise. Perhaps you need to think about what you're storing in your say SharePoint environment to get the information back that you think would be relevant to the audiences, and also what you've got permissions to as well. So if you've got access to everything in your tenant, and maybe you don't need it, maybe you don't need access to all the archive sites or that, is you need to think about how that would impact people when they're doing their sort of Copilot queries, and how that would then reference documents within your tenant. So I think it's good. I think that it will lead to an exercise that will highlight for you. In fact, actually, the maturity models that this program offers around, keeping things organized and structured, and as the maturity goes up, I think plays a part actually in how Copilot can then improve on the responses you get. The higher that you're mature with the way you organize your data, you govern your data and things like that, then I think Copilot would be even better, because it would offer richer responses based on the information that is relevant, not necessarily what it can find. So I think there will be an element of organization needed if you did go down. I mean, to be fair, I mean, search kind of shows that anyway, but because it produces, say, a page of 1,000 results. I mean, how many of you look through all 1,000 results, right? You look for the top 5 and then you get bored and you go, maybe it's not hit my thing. And because the summaries are so generic when it returns results, you're thinking, well, out of those 5 or 10 results, what is relevant to my answer that I'm really looking for? And I think that's where the Copilot strength comes in, is it can choose the references that better match your prompts than it can with the regular search, based on the relationship mappings it's done within the semantic index. And that is quite powerful, I feel. I mean, Kevin might be able to say something a bit different now. Hi, Kevin. I know he's just joined the call because he's used it slightly longer than I have.
Drop me in it.
Yeah, I'm going to drop you in it. Yeah.
We talk about the value of search, and do people now that they've got Copilot use Copilot for searching rather than using the traditional SharePoint search tools?
It depends. It depends if you know what you're looking for or not. And I think for me, what I found Copilot is a bit better at finding stuff that I don't really know what it is, because you can't really search for. There is that thingy-me-jig called Watcher. And in fact, I'll give an example from today. I actually used Microsoft Copilot, the artist formerly known as Bing Chat Enterprise, because I was trying to remember the name of Kaggle, which, if you haven't seen it, fantastic repository, all sorts of data in there for doing machine learning, and people have open sourced a load of data that you can use for different scenarios. And I couldn't for the life of me remember what it was. And I tried searching through my email, because I know I'm subscribed to that, but you can't search an email for that data repository that I think begins with K. And so I went to Bing and I couldn't do it there. And then I remembered that I could use Bing Chat, went to that and literally said, can you give me that data repository that I think begins with K? Boom, came up as one of the references. So you can have that kind of slightly crazier conversation that, for many of us weirdos like myself, the way our brain works, you can ask Copilot that question. And I missed who it was, Cody, I think you mentioned there. And if you ask it for a tip, it has been proved through, look, there is a scientific paper about this, that it will give you a more thorough answer if you tell it you'll pay it something for it as well.
That was the question, Kevin, that I asked just before you joined was, and that's kind of what I was expecting, because with a common objection I get to folks that don't even want to try search because, quote unquote, they don't know what they're looking for. And I often say to them, you don't need to know the file name, you need to know some of the keywords from the document. And then just look at what it comes back with. So I'm hoping to see an even better set of results because of the grounding and the context that is inferred from your graph usage, that it will come back and give you better results of the, as you say, kind of the fuzzy queries. So thanks for your feedback on that.
I have got a question in the chat, which is talking about how have your habits changed? Have you changed your habits on how you approach something when you're starting a new piece of work?
Yeah, certainly for me, my habits are awful. I've gone through a lot more snack food. I'm drinking a lot more just from having to chat about Copilot. No, I mean, in terms of bringing things forward with Copilot, I will ask Copilot a lot more questions instead of going for search. Generally, it's my first port of call more often than not with Elements. I would say my biggest habit is meetings. One of my worst habits is forgetting to turn on blooming transcription. So one of my habits is about 10 minutes in the meeting, swearing slightly and then interrupting whoever's speaking, saying, do you mind if we turn on transcriptions? I would say for organizations, you can absolutely enable it by default, having that conversation if that's something that you absolutely want within there. So obviously, sharing that information, making it more available is something you need to make an active decision on, and it's something we as a company want to make sure that actually there's rare occasions where we want to put that, because for various compliance and other reasons on there. So that's why we have to actively turn it on from it. So having that habit of turning it on becomes a key one. But certainly day-to-day asking questions, definitely my habit of catching up after I've been off a day. I work a 9-day fortnight, so yesterday kind of just asked it to catch up across my teams, across my Outlook and others. What are the key things I need to think about? It won't help you prioritize. I think it's a really important message. It won't say, tell me the high priority items. It does not know what you consider a priority, but you can say what are the common topics that have come up, and it will pick up those different items as well. I think the other one that I love and looking at the screen on there as well as habit is that leveling the playing field. I was talking with a colleague about Excel. If I'm honest, I'm not the biggest fan of Copilots in Excel. As you see the way I looked up to make sure I got the naming convention right, determined to try and name these things correctly. But one thing, I hate conditional formatting. I have used it for years and I can still never get it right. I now can, because I asked Copilot to do it for me. Assuming I've got that data in a table, I can then get Copilot to set that on there. And even if I can't, I can ask it how to do things, and it gives me a much better guide than I would get through just asking help. So I would say that leveling the playing field, how to do the cool stuff that you see other people doing, looking at that within documents, Copilot's really helped me with that.
There's also a point, I don't know if you ever encountered this, I certainly do in some of my calls, is multitasking when you're doing stuff. And then what happens is sometimes I get my attention slightly drifted away from what someone is saying, and then I miss that key point. And it's probably when Kevin's talking. I get drifted. No, I'm kidding. I get that, you get that point, or you get distracted. You know, I've got a window here, suddenly a bird might have flown by or something, and I go, ooh, you know, and then I've missed that key point. And you can go back with Copilot and go, what did I just miss? Because you know you missed it. And it's really noticeable when you don't have it in a client. You're like, oh no. Then you have to go around your mates and go, what did they just say about this? Because I completely missed it. And there's these little things, these really irritating little things that have huge amounts of value to the way you work, because you've got that. I've got this tool that has my back feeling, because I know I can quickly ask and go, hey, you know, and they can give me the answer, which is absolutely great. And I love that feeling. And it's the same with if I want to do things faster with GitHub. GitHub Copilot is insanely cool. You know, I do PowerShell scripting, some C# coding, depends on, you know, and some like Teams, Toolkit apps. So we, you know, me and Kevin have both experimented with writing our own Copilots and things like that. And using that to write code faster is just insanely cool. It's like a scarily intuitive thing, and it's really, and this is the key thing about Copilot, is getting the Copilot into the flow of your work, right into the flow of your work. And I think GitHub have done this really well. Is you're writing code, and then it can, you know, work out what you're trying to write in, say, a method, and then it will go suggest the remaining, that not just a little line, the whole thing, you know, how it would finish the whole thing. And you look at it and you go, wow, it's worked out what I'm building, and now I can accept that piece of code and include that. So that there are some things like that are very, very good at being in your flow of work for me, to help you out in that. And then yes, you've got the chat experiences and things like that, like you have with others. But I find that particular Copilot very good for that. Kevin, did you have your hand up?
I did previously, and I've forgotten what I was talking about. I got distracted, ironically. enough on there. What I was thinking of another point though, and we kind of talked about this in our kind of preamble to this session, was that flow of work. I think, and then we were talking about habits previously. The ones that fit most are the ones that kind of give you those little nudges into Copilot. I think the Teams meeting's fantastic. You've got your big Copilot button and it kind of nudges you with 10 minutes to go to say you might want to do a summary. I love those little kind of reminders that there. I think I use it more in Word when I do use Word, because you have the big Copilot button that kind of hovers over almost as you're typing and bringing things along, versus PowerPoint where you kind of actively click on something, actively bring up that Copilot window. So I hope that Microsoft can bring those nudges into the right way of doing. It's similar to how I think, as you said there, Paul, as well, GitHub Copilot is fantastic at that. It just feels natural and you don't notice it's there until you forget to renew your license and it disappears and you wonder what's happening from it. Not that I've done that. And I hope that Microsoft finds that right balance between the nudges that make it useful to use and the really intrusive, you must buy this, you must use this all the time. And I think Word has found a good way of doing that, and GitHub especially.
Yeah, and we were talking about this the other day about the different roles that you play within an organization. Different people within their organization will use Copilots very differently to the way we're describing them. There's like we talked about that finance person, and you mentioned about a team that you were discussing as an example on Friday, where they use the Excel Copilot to death. They really love it, and I personally don't like it. So I'm like, it's too. I guess in some ways it could be. I think the problem is between the computer and the chair. Is I'm not. I don't. Excel's okay. I'm just not.
But I think it forces you to work
in
a particular way.
Yeah,
and that's the problem with the Excel one. You have to do it that way, and if it's not natural to you, having to change those habits is a lot harder. And I think that's why people have struggled with it a bit.
Yeah, but certainly the Teams one is really good. You could put in your rail and you can just click on it and then start interacting with it like a chat. And I find that one really good to sort of jump into. And Word as well. If you're writing out a document and again, I mentioned this earlier about that blank page feeling, then you can quickly type in what you want and then give you a suggestion, jumpstart your effort in that. I do sometimes get blocked in those. Was it creators block? Writer's block. I do sometimes get that, and it's a good way of just nudging you out of that zone, which is certainly cool.
Kevin.
Yeah, I was just going to raise a comment about a few things on here, and I think, Paul, you were speaking about this when I joined, and I can see on the slides we've got here, was it fourth point down, internal content must be governed. I'm going to challenge that ever so slightly. I think you will get the best experience out of it if you have very managed content, but by the same token, let's be honest, you're never going to have, certainly for a large organization, every bit of content completely governed, completely tidy. There's always going to be some awkward person, trying to find the polite word for it, who doesn't govern their content, who saves everything in OneDrive and then shares a bit of this and shares a bit of that on there. You can help with these adoption ones, encourage people about the right way to do things. You can enforce elements, but there's always going to be the ways that aren't perfect. You can get advantages from Copilot without it being fully governed. You will get the best experience when you have set it up and cleansed it completely. And the reason I say that is I don't think you necessarily should stop any Copilot program of evaluation until you've tidied up your data. Because let's be honest, we've been telling people as experts that you've got to tidy up your data for as long as I've been working with SharePoint, and yet still there's so many out there that aren't. So if we're going to wait for that to happen, Copilot will never take off, and I think people will lose a lot of the advantages. So I would say I'm challenging that slightly. What you should have is a program to establish how you're going to do that over time. I don't say don't do it, but just don't let it stop you completely.
As the person that does periodic governance and compliance talks. I mostly agree. You're pushing back. I'm going to push back slightly. Yes, but I mean, you're absolutely right. It shouldn't be a reason not to do it. I mean, I think that would be a terrible thing for an organisation to take away from this. But they also, this is more, it's like delve on steroids or good search on steroids. If you've got any high value, high risk content that isn't appropriately secured, that's going to find its way out into the organization through the AI. And so, like all important things, they need to be treated importantly. With great power comes great risk. And I put a little chart in the chat just to reflect that classic likelihood impact matrix.
So I was just going to ask, how did you sort of you all get on? Just because I don't like the conflict, but no. How do you get on with sort of sharing success stories? How did people kind of share what worked for them? Did you were using 365 tools or Copilot Hub? I think we did talk about that a bit, but yeah, how do people sort of share what was working for them?
I started a podcast. Sorry, Paul, you were about to say something there.
I was going to say Copilot Hub is definitely not the place to go for sharing. It's not a function yet, that tool. You might have seen the marketing from Ignite. When you come to use it, it's probably a release or few away from that sort of capability. It will suggest prompts, but it won't do anything about. I think it had like you can share prompts with your mates and stuff like that, but yeah. So instead, what we do is we just take fragments from Kev's podcast and share it around the org.
Perfect.
But I can see Andre's talking about the Centre of Excellence that's been available. And please, Andre, there is no capital P in Copilot. Someone was going to say it. And I think it's a nice starter. It's a good accelerator, but having that community, whether it's in Teams, whether it's in Viva Engage, a place to kind of share stories and encouraging people to do that, having those regular, almost drop-in sessions, those regular times where you can go in and say, this has worked for me, this hasn't worked for me, but helping jump on that. I think we've been very lucky with our internal rollout that the team loves hearing those, and will kind of give a lot of amplification, a lot of backing to people to sharing those stories and pushing that out there. So picking ones for those up the work. A great example I found on Friday was in a breakout meeting, and I was like, oh, we've come back together. I wonder if I can use this to kind of look at the other breakout rooms, and you could get a summary from the different breakout rooms from this. You could see different conversations that happened across the different areas. It captured all of those and bring those back together, and was a lovely scenario. So I think it's those different ones, making sure you have that community to boost that, to support it, and then encourage more people to do it as well.
Thank you, Karen. That sounds good. Yeah.
I can see Marc nudging us on, keeping us the right thing.
We're coming to the end now, so thank you very much, Kevin and Paul, and everybody for joining us. Next session is February 20th, where we've got Michael, who's going to be our guest star. So thank you, Michael, for agreeing to do that. And we're going to be talking about practical scenarios around service management, I believe. So yeah, please join us on the 20th of Feb, and have great Januaries, and try not to step too late playing around with Copilot tonight.
Yep. More to come.
Thank you all.
Thanks very much all. Cheers. Bye-bye.